Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Verifiably Random. I am Marc Vanlerberghe, Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer of the Foundation. And today I am joined by a very special guest, Nick Bougalis. Nick, who is just joined the Algorand Foundation as our new CTO. Nick, welcome.
Hi, Mark. It's wonderful to be on here.
So we're going to focus this entire episode on you and talking about your experience, talk about like why you joined the Algorand Foundation, your views of the future, and of course, with the caveat that you've been with the foundation for 1 week. So probably you may not have all the answers yet, but maybe in a week from now you will.
It's pretty awesome. Everybody at the foundation has been great so far. I'm learning a lot, and I'm diving head first, and everybody's really helpful. But no, I don't have all the answers yet. I don't know that I even have all the questions. Uh, so so I'm learning, and I hope that beyond even the foundation, like people in the community, everybody will be, really help me get up to speed.
Well, looking at the early reactions from the community, everybody's been super, super excited and really looking forward to getting to know you and getting to know a little bit about your background as well. So maybe we can start there and talk
Yeah.
about that. So let's start all the way back. How did you get into software? How did you get into like cryptography? And like the question everybody always asks is like, how did you get into blockchain?
Okay. So I didn't start out wanting, to be a software engineer or programming or anything like that. My original like passion was automotive engineering. I really wanted to have a career in Formula One a hopefully as a driver, right? But I know that that's not really an option. So as an engineer, and once I got to college, I really got exposed to computers and started programming and started learning a little bit more about it. And really, it just kind of took, the bug bit me, and I was hooked. And ever since that time, I've been programming. And honestly, I can't think of anything that I'd rather be doing. How I got into blockchain traces all the way back to the beginning. The first company that I worked for was a company that was developing IRC chat software called Webmaster, and I was working together with David Schwartz. David Schwartz, of course, is one of the architects of the XRP Ledger and the current CTO over at Ripple. And he and I started working together in 1997, and we worked together all the way up until I left Ripple. So for almost 25 years, with the brief exception of 1 year when I was at Samsung and he was off starting Ripple. And so I was at Samsung, and I wasn't particularly happy with the culture there. It's way too many vice presidents to report to, and
Yes.
so he said, you really should come over at Ripple because I could really use the help. And yeah, it didn't take much convincing. I joined Ripple, and that was my start on blockchain.
And so what year was that?
That
Roughly?
was 2013.
2013. Oh, so very early. So that was like Ripple was a very young company at that point, no?
I was the 8th employee of the company.
The eighth
Uh,
employee.
I actually kicked Chris Larson out of his desk so that I could work on my first day there. I didn't know who Chris Larson was at the time, but he was very gracious.
So Stacy, when she mentioned like our new CTO is like very OG in a very OG chain, she was not kidding. Like the eighth employee at XRP, that is very, very early.
I mean, yeah, it's early, and it both feels like half an hour ago and a million years ago at the same time. I mean, but I think everybody in this space sympathizes. Things move so fast, and at the same time, like, you know, so slow.
And how long were you at Ripple?
I was at Ripple for a decade.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience at Ripple, like the things you focused on, the things you were most proud of while you were there?
I was very, very focused on programming. I'm a C++ software engineer. That's kind of my bread and butter. And the XRP Ledger is written entirely in C++. And so my first task was open sourcing the code. At the time when I joined, the code base was not open sourced yet. So a few things needed to be buttoned up before it could be open sourced. So we did that. And then I really have focused on several things. I focused on performance. We got the transactions per second really to scale really high. I focused on improving the performance of the system generally. We developed custom databases for storing the backend data. More than that, I then transitioned a little bit more into management, and I helped grow the team over there. So it was really a lot of thinking about through problems and trying to figure out solutions and how all of these pieces that the XRP Ledger provided could be used to provide additional enhanced services. I was also responsible for the NFT standards on the XRP Ledger, so I coded up all the NFT code for that.
I'm sure you must have seen like a lot of change happening in the blockchain industry from the moment you joined to the moment you left XRP, no? Like you've gone to like multiple waves.
Things moved a lot, and like I think that's a story more broadly for the space, right?
Yeah.
Like everything has changed so much. A lot of things that were seen very suspiciously at the time, right? People were very skeptical of anything that wasn't Bitcoin. In some respect, people still are, but now there's increasing acceptance, right? That you can't have like one chain that will like hold the world's data and like everybody will be on the same chain. And so I think people are coming to the understanding that you need tools that are tailored to the specific use cases that you're pursuing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so things changed a lot, obviously, and I mean even just in the last year, right? Like regulatory headwinds turned into cautious tailwinds, I want to say, and so there's a lot that's happening.
Yeah. And so after Ripple, you took a little break from blockchain, right? You
I
started
did.
a company. You started a company, Code Laboratories. What was that
Uh,
about?
I started a company called Number Eight. Code Laboratories was earlier. Code Laboratories was a really interesting venture. We developed a 3D camera. I think that my proudest statement that I can make about that is that one of the cameras that we manufactured flew on the space station,
Oh,
on the
wow.
International Space Station. So that's a cool claim to fame.
Yeah.
Number Eight was really focused on cryptography and building cryptographic hardware security modules that are programmable.
So that means you're very excited about anything that's cryptography related.
Cryptography has been kind of a constant thread, in my career. I hesitate to call myself a cryptographer, like especially when over here we have people like Silvio Micali, right? I hesitate. I'm a dilettante compared to Dr. Micali, but yeah, cryptography has kind of been a consistent thread throughout my career. Applied cryptography, I would say, and yeah, it's incredibly exciting to see like all of these primitives that at some point were thought to be academic and like of no real practical use, right? Finding applied use cases and being used to meaningfully impact how people do business.
So talking about that, what are some of your most kind of favorite primitives? And I'll tell you, you get bonus points if you mention verifiable random functions and ZK proof.
I mean, verifiable random functions are pretty cool, right? No argument there. They underpin Algorand, and I think that's great. ZK, zero knowledge stuff. Like at first, it sounds like a magical thing when you describe it to people. How can you prove that you know something without revealing anything about it? To me, that's a really interesting field, again, with very real practical applications. Multi-party computation, right, is also a significant thing that really matters a lot. We're in this scary/exciting time with post-quantum. Quantum computers are kind of a thing, and then so we're starting to think of what do we do. We have good post-quantum algorithms for encryption, but unfortunately we don't really have anything that's really 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 well suited for signatures right now, and so that's an active area of research. Um, and then I think the other interesting thing to me is homomorphic encryption, and that's the ability to process encrypted data in meaningful ways and transform them. Again, very much attuned to privacy and the ability to run computations, for example, on the cloud without revealing your data to the cloud provider. Now, any one of those things really is interesting in itself, right? But I think the real power comes when you combine all of these things together in different ways to build different things.
Right.
And one of the challenges I think with blockchain is that a lot of the time there's a little bit of a step back from privacy. If you think of privacy in terms of how we think of cash, right? Which, granted, I think is a little bit of a endangered species these days. Everybody uses cards and so forth. But I do think that we have lost some level of privacy in that process. And I think that some of these primitives, together with blockchain, can help bring some of that privacy back. And I think that's an important thing to be thinking
Right.
about.
Right. So you're a firm believer that blockchains need to figure out a way to kind of enable private transactions.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of times that word kind of gets has bad connotations, like, oh, you're trying to do something shady, otherwise why wouldn't you? And I don't agree with that. I think that privacy is something that we all deserve and all need. Not everybody needs to know everything about everybody else. And so in my mind, unless we're able to have at least a percentage, right? At least some portion of the privacy that we enjoy with cash on blockchains, we will have maybe not failed as an industry, but perhaps not lived up to kind of the highest ideals that we should be striving for.
Right, right. So when you think about like blockchains in general and blockchain infrastructure, like how do you think about like what would you say are some of your guiding kind of design principles to kind of build secure and scalable kind of blockchain infrastructure? How are you thinking about that?
So that is an interesting question, because there's so many competing interests, right? So many competing priorities. Obviously, you want systems that are open, that you don't have gatekeepers, right? And that's an important function. Algorand has really solved the problem elegantly, I think, with the use of verifiable random functions, right? So I get credit for that, right? I
Yes,
mentioned it.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
Got the point.
excellent. So Algorand has solved that problem very effectively. And but I also think that the challenge really boils down to how do you build this infrastructure in a way that's organic. People that choose to run a node, right? And I started running a node, by the way. I started running a node just the other day. It's synced and it's doing great, and I'm very happy with it. And I keep
Well,
switching
bonus
over to
point.
the NodeKit console to look at that.
Yes.
Um, and so the interesting question is, these networks, they provide a service. And so in some systems, running the node software is incentivized, right? In other systems, it's not. How do we make sure that these networks, as a whole, as an aggregate, right, are robust in the face of failure, and so that no one operator becomes like indispensable? Like if a large node operator decided to take their node down, like you don't want the network to suffer and be crippled. And I think we've certainly seen that sort of thing in other chains, right, where one entity is running so much of the infrastructure that it becomes like a key failure point. And so I think that's the most interesting and difficult challenge, right? And ultimately, I haven't found anything better than, you choose to run a node because the network as a whole provides a service that you find valuable enough that you want to support it. As much as I think that that's a idealistic view, I also recognize that it's probably not entirely what you want to be basing the health of the network on. And I think that's a challenge, right, for all of us to figure out, what from community members to software engineers to even across multiple chains.
But it's interesting if you look at the evolution of like layer one chains and like Ethereum, of course, is like the archetype of like probably the most decentralized kind of network you can find, but it kind of suffers, as a result of that as well, because the scalability is not there, the finality is not there, and stuff like that. But then when you see it like the newer generation of like layer ones, they they tend to not talk about decentralization that often anymore. And when you look at the details of how they operate, in Solana, you need to basically run your hardware in the data center. So that's an expensive proposition to do. If you, like on Aptos and other networks, it costs you millions of dollars to kind of run nodes. And so that doesn't feel very decentralized to me anymore. And so this ideal of decentralization seems like it's being diluted quite a bit if you look at those newer blockchains. And I think Algorand in that sense is still kind of OG in that regard, right? Because we firmly believe in decentralization. I mean, you set up a node, you probably only spend a couple $100 on your node because a mini PC can run it. And there's very few chains where you can actually set up a node and run it effectively, for $300.
I think so first of all, I agree. Like, there is a barrier to entry, right? Regardless of how much it costs to run a node, right? There's a barrier to entry. And the question is, where do we set that barrier? Or or more broadly, perhaps, where should that barrier be to make it uh, attainable for somebody that's interested to run these nodes without having to spend a ton of money or invest a ton of resources or a ton of time even. One thing that I've always said, going back many years now, people tend to think of decentralization as like a binary thing. You're either centralized or you're decentralized. I don't buy that. Decentralization is, in my mind, a multidimensional quantity, I should say. Uh, it has many different characteristics, many different attributes. And you can be very decentralized in one way and a little less decentralized in another, or not decentralized at all in some third. I think our goal should be to figure out that balance, right? Like,
Right.
where can we put the, where do we set that vector at to figure out, yes, this is sufficiently centralized, or this is not centralized, decentralized enough, and so forth. And so I think that that's a challenge, and a lot of people have good thoughts and good metrics for how to evaluate that, but I don't think anybody really has a framework to analyze this that really can capture everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So talking more general about like the kind of blockchain industries, and like we talked about privacy and the importance of privacy as kind of an unsolved problem for most blockchains. Are there any other kind of big bottlenecks, technical bottlenecks that you see, or other kind of unsolved problems that exist in the public blockchain space that need to be tackled for blockchains to be really mass adopted?
I think there's a few things, but really for mass adoption, I think there's two challenges, like really good key management and really good ability to do key recovery. We all subscribe to the mantra, not your keys, not your coin, and so forth, right? But the reality is that not everybody is able to keep a key and have like secure backup practices and make sure that you know uh, plan ahead, so if something happens to them, they get hit by a bus, their crypto goes to their family, and so forth. And these are, in a sense, problems that we have solved as a society, right? Like, we have wills and we have powers of attorney and all of these other things, but none of that exists for crypto yet. And the solution, well, that's not true. Some solutions exist, but and they work, but I think that they're still a little bit uh, too difficult for everyday usage. And I think that the challenge is figuring something out there that really works without sacrificing some of the principles that we're trying to build, right? Because again, if the solution is your crypto will be held at a bank and you'll be using the bank app to send stuff, I don't know that that necessarily like ascribes to the crypto philosophy per se. I do think that that's a challenge. And again, the privacy implications, right? We were discussing before.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the keys, but like I've been in this job over a year and a half, and I have like several wallets and I have different accounts, and so I'm like I've been thinking about getting a new phone, but I'm really nervous about getting a new phone because I get a new phone, then suddenly I have to make sure that all my apps that potentially have privacy but not have privacy, that they're all backed up properly, and I'm like nervous about like getting a new phone because I may have forgotten something,
Mhm.
and it's tricky. And I'll even though I use Ledger and I like everything is kind of rekeyed to a Ledger device,
Mhm.
still you experiment, you try something new. Like there's a new set of private keys. Like did I back them all up? I think so, but I'm not 100% sure. And so it is a big problem, right? It is a big
It,
problem.
it's a huge problem, and I'll tell you a couple of like a funny anecdote. First of all, I don't know if you know who Stephen Thomas is. He used to be a CTO of Ripple. He was the Bitcoin JS guy, right? That's his original claim to fame. So back when he was developing Bitcoin JS, he would often have a need to like send a transaction just to test something new that he was working on or whatever. And so the easiest thing to be doing at the time was to send one Bitcoin. Again, this is the time when Bitcoin was nothing. And so he's probably sent thousands of Bitcoins, right,
Gee,
to addresses that he probably doesn't have the keys to.
yeah.
And I think everybody knows this story too. I think it's been written about on Wired or some magazine. He has a little hardware device, a little encrypted USB drive, where he had his Bitcoin wallet that had some significant amount of Bitcoins. I don't know how much. And he forgot the PIN for that device. And here's the kicker: the device is coded so that if you enter the PIN wrong 3 times or 10 times or something like that, it wipes itself. And he only has, I think, one try left before the device wipes itself. And somebody figured out that there is a way to like chemically etch the chip and then look at it under an electron microscope and figure out like how to extract the key, but that only works in certain versions of the hardware, and you can't be sure which version of the hardware you have until you do that. And so either you gain access or you destroy it. So he's kind of in this quantum superposition where he has the crypto and he doesn't. And so again, like that's not a good place to be at. Imagine if you worked all your life to leave something for your children, and then you don't know if they're going to be able to get it or access it. And that's, by the way, is another challenge, right? Despite huge advances, like just in the last like couple of years, like there've been huge advances, in the user experience. It can still be very difficult and very challenging, like for people to understand exactly what they're doing. You have to verify by looking these 50, 60 character strings, of like random digits. Who among us hasn't tried to send crypto and sent like a tiny amount just to make sure that the address is correct and it's received on the other end before sending a larger amount and so forth? These are just not like, not usable things. And I think that's another challenge for the industry broadly. Like, how
Yeah.
do we improve on these sort of things? And some progress has been made, right? Now we have like HD keys, deterministic keys that, you have one master seed and you can derive multiple account types and wallets from them and so forth. And I think that's a little bit of an improvement.
Recently launched on Para.
Yeah. Now we can use like regular 24-word, backups instead of more proprietary formats.
Yeah.
And so I think that all of those things should be on the radar for all of us as a community, not just us with Algorand, but all of us as a community.
Yeah, and also us participation in the DREC Alliance is also trying to solve the problem of like private key and using a social recovery mechanism for private key, opposed to having to write it down on a post-it note and hang it against your terminal or something. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about Algorand and like specifically your role as CTO. So what drew you to Algorand? Why Algorand?
Honestly, I will tell you, for me, it was the people, right? Like I got on a call with Stacy and I started talking to Stacy and the enthusiasm was infectious. And then I talked to Bruno and a couple of other people on the team. And really it was the people that sold me. It was just such a wonderful, welcoming experience for me. I enjoy working with great people, smart people, and I enjoy working with people who are enthusiastic about what they do. And so for me, that was a huge factor. But I also see Algorand kind of as a refined, improved version that took all of the ideas that, kind of the early pioneers, if you will, right? Put together, and maybe some of them in embryonic form and some of them like more fleshed out, and then put all of them together with additional extra cryptographic cool sauce, right? To produce something that really combined and brought a lot of the best characteristics of many different chains and produced something that really works and is cohesive. I see Algorand as really as a great opportunity to continue building on top of this system and improving it in meaningful ways, both at the core level, right, at the protocol level and at the core blockchain level, but also at the higher levels, right, like the tooling around it, the things that enable different use cases, building new things on top of it.
Yeah. And how do you see your role like as CTO of the foundation? How would you describe your immediate priorities and your let's say 6 to 12 month goals?
Honestly, like my immediate priority is just to learn. I'm trying to talk to as many people as I can. I'm trying to absorb as much knowledge as I can. I recognize that I'm the newcomer to this particular ecosystem, right? And for all of my experience in the space, I think it's important for me to start by listening and start by making sure I understand where people are at and some of the challenges that the Algorand in particular faces, whatever those might be, right? So that's my first priority. Very recently, we announced the roadmap. I think you were on that call, where you were discussing the new roadmap, and I think I'm incredibly excited about the things that you discussed, and I'm looking forward to kind of pitching in and trying to help, build, on our way to that roadmap. So my goal for the next couple of weeks, 3 weeks, is to listen, and after that, to start contributing more actively and engaging and being more involved on the day to day. Broadly, the way I look at it is the foundation has multiple roles. I think that within our ambit should be to shepherd the ecosystem broadly, right? Support things that need support, provide the framework for the community to contribute and build, right? Empower the community in any way that we can, and just make sure that the space is growing and that Algorand can have a consistent and thoughtful representation.
Yeah. You mentioned something interesting. You mentioned earlier, like, it's not just about like evolving from a technology perspective, the protocol itself, it's also evolving everything that runs on top of it, like what kind of products or what kind of tools, what kind of infrastructure kind of runs on top of the protocol that makes it easier for users, for businesses, for developers to kind of onboard. And you also mentioned the role of the community here. How are you, and then we talked about the roadmap briefly. So if you think about that, like how do you see the line between what the foundation and the foundation's engineering team should develop versus what could potentially be developed by developers in our community, where the foundation may be able to guide or help? How do you see that kind of interaction?
So first of all, I think that the more the community can build, right, the better, right? We don't want to have the foundation be the sole contributor or the primary contributor even in most of these projects, right? And especially for actual applications, we don't want the foundation to be building like applications. We want the foundation to be building kind of the very low level tooling that allows people to access Algorand that people can use to build things on top of. The way I look at it is anything that you would kind of define as a public good or kind of a necessary thing to build on top of the blockchain is within the ambit of the foundation, and we should strive to build that if it's not already available. For things that are already available, right? I think that we should be supporting those, contributing to them, enhancing them. I think that the moment like a credible team steps up that says, we're gonna be the maintainers of this, we're gonna own it. I think that it's our responsibility to take a step back and let them try and let them do that, and contribute to them, support them in any way that we can. I see the foundation in its role as an enabler and as a force to move things forward and to provide support while allowing people to still do what they think is best. I don't think we should be prescribing what people should be doing or what people can be doing. I don't think that's not something I'm personally interested in. I think that we should offer our opinions and say like we think that this is a good thing to be doing. Here are the challenges with this other thing, and here are some of the issues. But I don't think that we should be in the business of telling people what to do. I think we should be in the business of empowering people to build. I'm a firm believer in building, and everything in the space really has been built by people.
And so I think you also mentioned that one of the things that is an important focus area is kind of the tooling for developers, right? Like making it as easy as possible, for developers to onboard onto blockchain and Algorand in particular. And I think this has been a challenge for the industry as a whole, right? Like I think if you look at the stats about like how many active developers are there across crypto, that number really hasn't changed much over the last couple of years. It's been hovering around like 30,000, maybe 30, 40,000 developers. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of like Python developers there are or TypeScript developers there are. And so we've always had the point of view is like, what can we do to onboard Web 2 developers into Web 3? And that's why we have native Python, and that's why we have native TypeScript. But I think there's probably a lot more that we can or should do to make it as easy as possible to onboard these developers, because it also requires like a different mindset, right? It's like developing for Web3. It needs a different mindset than developing for in a Web2 environment.
It does, and I think really for me it boils down to two things, right? I don't necessarily think that people need to understand the finer points of blockchain or consensus or all of these like low level things any more than I as a developer need to understand the inner workings of a hard drive or the giant magneto resistance effect, right? To understand, to use a hard drive or to store a file. And so I think that what we need to be doing broadly, right, is defining like these like low level tools and libraries and functionality that people can then build on top of a chain, to do things that they want to do without necessarily having to understand all the details. Like a really interesting example for me, and I've used this example many times. I really don't understand why we didn't have like a DocuSign type solution on the chain. Like to me, that's a perfect usage for a signed document. You don't have to reveal the document. You produce the hash of it, and that gets entombed in the blockchain. You can say, I signed this on such and such date, and that's a verifiable thing. Somebody can go and look, and you know that this was submitted at this block, so it must have been signed as of this block, right? Because it's entombed in the chain.
Bruno will love that comment, by the way.
To me, like, these are the sort of things that we need to be thinking about. How do we allow developers to not worry about the blockchain details? Here's a thing, and here's the capabilities that it provides and the tools that I have that allow me to use it. And then they can use those tools to build something. The blockchain almost becomes irrelevant in a way, right? But I think that's the best technology. The best technology is the technology that you don't think about. You pick up your phone and you punch a number. You can be up in, like, at the border, like at the edge of space, and still, like, have, cell coverage. Think about how crazy that is. And nobody thinks of all of the work that goes into this. Like the GSM protocol, base stations, and the home location registers, and all of those other things that are there and work together to allow your call to be routed while you're flying over the Atlantic to some guy that's driving his car down the street. It works magically, right? And so I think, to me, that's the magic. That's the magic of the best technology. Right? It works and it's transparent and you don't need to think about it. In my mind, blockchains really should be public utilities.
Yeah. So when you think about like the blockchains more in general, like I think everybody probably agrees that there's not going to be ever a god chain that like eats up all the other chains, and there'll be one chain that'll be the decentralized transaction platform for the world. So we're going to be in a world where there's multiple chains that are coexist. And so what's your view on like this cross-chain interoperability, like composability, like how will this world shape up in your view in like 5 years from now, where multiple chains exist and coexist at the same time? How do we avoid all the friction that entails?
I think that you nailed it when you said composability, right? And that's what we were discussing earlier too with some of these cryptographic primitives, right? Like the real power comes from when things are composable. And so I agree with you that, we need to get to a point where transactions can be composable in a cross-chain fashion, right? So I can do one transaction on one chain and another transaction on another chain, and they're interdependent, right? They're, one depends on the other, or one, requires the other to complete. Those are interesting primitives and will enable a lot of functionality that is currently not possible. Cross-chain transfers, things like that, without requiring a trusted intermediary. Well, I mean, because once you put in trusted intermediaries, we can do all those things, right? But who wants trusted intermediaries? I don't know that I have like a 5-year view on what what that should look like or what that should be. I have some thoughts, but I don't know that they're mature enough to share right now. But I think it's definitely something that I would like to see us be thinking about and be thought leaders on, right? Because I do believe that Algorand, especially, right, has a lot of attributes that would enable it to really serve as a bridge, across many different ecosystems.
Yeah. We'll give you another week to kind of clarify your thoughts on that topic.
Sounds good.
So talk about community and ecosystem. So what do you think is the best way for like developers and kind of community members to engage on the roadmaps, to engage with you on like the technology, like open source contributions obviously would be one of them, but like what was the best way for people to engage in your view?
So I think that really depends. Obviously, social media is a big communication channel, and I like the fact that it's very open, right? People can just reach out and type a message and put the message out there, and you can engage. I think for me, the challenge with social media is really the kind of the fragmented nature of the conversation and the inherent limits. You used to have to type 160 words, 160 characters, right? And so those things are not often conducive to the conversations that you need to have for any sort of engineering challenge, or really more broadly, like any sort of planning challenge. I really like using GitHub, issues and conversational models like that. I plan on being more active on social media, on Twitter. It's X these days. Sorry, I've been gone a while.
Algo fam will love you for that.
Wow. So yeah, and I look forward to it. I've been looking at Twitter kind of like incognito, right, to see what all is there. So it's super interesting. Also, I think that it's really a good idea for people to be proposing things and writing pieces and saying, hey, I think we should be doing this, and stimulating a conversation, right? And kind of getting a discussion going. For me, the best thing is just for people to be interacting. I think that great ideas don't emerge in isolation. I think great ideas, are born when many people come together. Everybody whittles their own ideas against each other's ideas and result in something that's really sharp at the end.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's end with a couple of like rapid fire questions. Yes, you can only reply with like one word or like one sentence, no more than that. So first one, which technical book would you recommend everyone in crypto to read?
The Bitcoin white paper, because I think it lays out foundational ideas, right? I think it's more than anything. I think it lays out a philosophy, right? And in many respects, that's way more important than any technical thing. So many interesting things, right? Like some of the for me as a cryptographer, right? Some of the papers, on things like verifiable random functions or ZK are super interesting. Sorry, I know you said rapid fire and I'm only allowed, one word or one sentence, but
Okay. Next question. What's your favorite programming language?
C++ is my bread and butter. I love C++. I've been doing it for 30 years now.
And so it's funny because when I went to college, I also learned C++, and that's a long time ago, and it's still a language that's like widely used, right?
It's still a language that's very widely used, and actually has been seeing like a resurgence and like much more active engagement from the committee, and building and adding new functionality and new features. It's probably a very different language than what you remember. It's a very different language than I learned, but I find it to be both elegant and powerful. And I know some people disagree on that, on the elegance, right? Aspect of it. But I think that languages are tools, just as like human languages are tools, right? Like I don't think that I speak Greek, right? As well, I don't think that Greek is better than English in conveying meaning. I might find the language to be more elegant, and I might find the English to be more functional, right? But I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other.
Yeah. Okay, next question. If you weren't a software engineer or cryptographer, what would you be doing?
I thought that I'd be doing, as I said, Formula One stuff, but honestly,
We would have
I've
seen
taken.
if it wasn't for this, we would have seen you in the Netflix Formula One show as one of the like how many 24 drivers or something?
Oh God, I don't think I'm a good enough driver for that. I in my mind I am, but in reality I don't think so. I don't think I'd be a great driver. No, I'd love to have been an engineer, building cool things in Formula One. But I think I'd also just enjoy cooking. I love cooking.
Yeah. And Greek food.
Any food, actually.
Any food. Yeah.
I feel very privileged that there's so many like great people on YouTube showing like, actual chefs, right? Showing like really cool recipes, and experimenting and trying those.
Wonderful. Well, is there anything that we should have talked about that we didn't before we close?
I feel like there's a ton of things, honestly, but this is like my first week. Programmers always come from zero, right? So this is my 0th week. I'm really looking forward to getting up to speed, and then maybe coming back on the podcast, and we can talk about all of these other things that we haven't had a chance to touch up on, and then interacting with everybody in the community as well.
Wonderful. And I just have to finish with this because I'm like marketing background. Like we just launched the Algorand campaign, and actually this is the alpha for this episode. We launched this Algorand campaign specifically for you to give you the best possible onboarding experience over the next 13 weeks to get to explore all of the apps and all of the different. And so we're hoping very much that you'll be participating in Algorand and taking advantage of this opportunity to explore our ecosystem.
It's been fun, and I really like it a lot. I hope that everybody tries it, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it very much.
And we're in
Good
week
job.
one,
Good
or
job.
we're in week one, but for you in week 0.
Yeah, week 0. We're in week 0 right now, so.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. Everybody is so excited to have you on board. And I'm sure we'll do many more Verifiable Randoms podcasts with you and hear your thoughts on a variety of other topics as well. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Sounds great, Mark. Thank you. And I am incredibly excited to be on board, and I'm really looking forward to interacting with everybody. Thank you to everybody who watched this.
And thanks, everyone. And so if you want to see what Nick has to say, you can follow him on Twitter, on X. and make sure you do so. And we'll hear back from Nick very soon. Thanks, everyone.